Hello again, Dr. Peter Welgan here. If you have been following me on this journey through this series of presentations I've been involved in, you probably are recognizing a fairly familiar face by this time. However, for those of you who are joining us just recently, I am Dr. Peter Welgan, clinical psychologist, research psychologist, psychophysiologist, and the director of the Welgan Center for Behavioral Medicine. If you're coming on board, we have been talking about a wide range of subjects that interest me as a psychologist and a psychophysiologist. We're in the middle of this series, and I want to pause for a moment here. And for those of you who have been following me, you remember our last discussion involved biofeedback. And I hope that introduction to biofeedback provided you with some clarification about how biofeedback works, and more importantly, how biofeedback can be of some help in actually changing organ system function in medical conditions, psychophysiologic conditions, psychosomatic conditions, and even somatic conditions that you are able to actually control yourself to a large extent. That's right, yourself. So I'm going to pause here. Our next subject here, I think, is really quite important for all of us to understand. And it is the subject of habits. By the way, once again, excuse my scribble, okay? As I told you before, I have a lot of trouble actually reading it myself. Anybody have any trouble with this? You just, I've given you my email. I'll give it to you again a little later. You can just email me and say, what is that over there? I can't read it. Nevertheless, we're talking about habits today. We all know what a habit is. We use the term daily. And we have some general understanding of a habit. But as a scientist coming out of learning theory laboratories and experimental psychology, those of us who spend time in that area, psychological research, realize there is a lot behind that term. A lot. A habit is a really interesting behavior. And it possesses very interesting characteristics. And that not just that you actually perform some type of behavioral pattern more or less on cue, reliably, and over time, most of your habits become sort of cemented as part of your behavioral repertoire. What I mean by that is you incorporate a lot of these learned abilities and functions as part of your overall behavior. And notice what I said. You acquire it. That means you learn it. And in order to learn a habit or a behavioral pattern, you have to establish a habit of being able to produce it over and over again. You just don't do this magically. Shaft of light doesn't hit you in the middle of the night and say, Eureka, I know how to do this. No. Virtually everything we know, we acquire, we learn, okay? That's what this is all about out here. We learn how to behave. Learning how to behave and learning to behave in some manner other than just random, chaotic behavioral patterns, some kind of a consistent, directional form of your behavior has to follow very clear learning theory principles and laws that have been actually revealed through science over about the last 110 years, okay? Long time in experimental laboratories. So many of my colleagues, my predecessors, have spent their entire careers, and many of their students, their entire careers, trying to understand the nuances, the variables at play in learned behavior, habit pattern formation. I'm not going to go into any extensive discussion about that. However, if those of you who are interested in this a little more deeply, you do call me, okay? I'll be glad to provide you with a lot of information about that, okay? So, let me ask you this question. You know what a habit is. Select one from your own memory, something that you perform on a generally regular basis. Take a moment and do that. Okay. Now, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Or how am I doing this? How am I actually performing this particular behavior? And why does it recur in the fashion that it does when I need to recruit it? Okay? When I actually need to perform that function. Remember, simply performing something doesn't necessarily establish a behavioral pattern, okay? No. Many of the behaviors that you've acquired over the years and integrated into the sense of self, who you are, have been behavioral patterns, habit patterns that have been formed very subtly, without really anybody else's awareness within the family, so to speak, but they are being acquired. You know, I have worked in the area of obesity for quite a long time, and there are many other medical problems that I have discussed with you before that tend to perform, if you will, the behavior, the organ systems, the behavior of those organ systems operate as if they have learned to behave that way, particularly those that are dysfunctional and not functioning properly, okay? How does an organ learn to behave inappropriately, okay? Dysfunctionally. Well, in the area of obesity, it's a similar question. How do we develop the habits of increasing fat and body mass, the habits, and then maintain that body mass? And when we try to reduce the body mass returns in about 1.5 to 3 years. That body mass returns because you actually return to many of the old habits that actually produce that abnormal body mass. Habits. Okay? You develop habits, they maintain, and very often they are very hard to break. And the ability to break a habit has a lot to do with the reinforcement history of that behavior, the reinforcement history of it. I'll have a lot to say about reinforcement, okay? And the conditioning of a habit pattern. This is an introductory discussion about habits. And if you're interested in how I actually begin to acquire behavioral patterns that seem to be consistent, cohesive, and directional, tune in with me tomorrow and I'll talk to you about the underlying principles, laws of behavioral acquisition. The acquisition of behavior, how we learn it, how we maintain it, and how we extinguish it. And how sometimes we're unable to extinguish those habits. Okay, that's my introduction to tomorrow's discussion on the conditioning of habit patterns, how we learn to be who we are, okay, and how we behave. So tune in tomorrow, and we're going to be returning to this chart here. And I'd like to describe to you how we actually develop a habit, okay? See you tomorrow.